The onshore wind resource in New Zealand is the best in the world. We think it's the best wind site in the country. Most other wind farms in New Zealand, 35 to 40, 45 maybe. This is 50% plus, so it's an exceptional wind site.
It's an independent wind generator, so it's not tied to the gentailers, for example. It's also a pure play on wind energy.
With climate change, we're likely to get more rain into where the hydro catchments are in this country and more wind into those areas that we're building wind farms.
Kia ora and welcome to Shed Lunch, brought to you by Sharesies. I'm Helen Mattison, and today we take a look at the takeover offer for New Zealand Windfarms by gentailer Meridian. If you haven't heard, this share offer represented a value of $91 million and a premium of 107% to the company's share price at the close of trading on February the 18th. There are a number of things riding on this, including a shareholder vote in May and High Court approval. I'll be talking to both the Chair of New Zealand Windfarms, Craig Stobo, and Meridian CEO, Neal Barclay, to get the picture for investors about what this deal means. Before we get started, here's some important information.
Investing involves risk. You might lose the money you start with. We recommend talking to a licensed financial advisor. We also recommend reading product disclosure documents before deciding to invest. Everything you're about to see and hear is current at the time of recording.
Welcome, Craig. Great to have you in the studio. Thanks for coming in.
Good morning to you. Thank you for having me.
Now, the market seems to have quite liked the Meridian offer for New Zealand Windfarms. The share price doubled. Probably fair to say it's been in the doldrums a little. Did you have any idea what to expect?
Well, no, in the sense of how the market would exactly react, but you're right, it went from 12.1 cents the day before, and then the announcement was 25 cents, and it sprinted up to around 23 and a half, so 107% from the day before. But of course, the market then takes a view on the certainty of that transaction. So they don't quite go to 25 cents, they go to 23 and a half till they get more information, which is still forthcoming. So I expect the share price to hang around there until we get certainty of the outcome.
We've got about 20,000 investors on Sharesies, which is about 12%, I think, of your register, which is a fair chunk for a retail block. What do you think they bought into New Zealand Windfarms? There's quite a few loyal people that have been there for quite some time. Why do you think it was attractive?
I think people came in with a couple of reasons. One is it's an independent wind generator, so it's not tied to the gentailers, for example. It's also a pure play on wind energy, and it's close to people. You can see the site, you can see the changes that are going on, and it's a very small company. I mean, it's pretty much 4 directors and roughly 12 staff. So you can wrap your head around what they're trying to do. It's very simple to understand. People came in originally, all of them have come in for the dividends, but we signalled a couple of years ago that we were moving into a development mode, and we ceased paying dividends. That upset a few of our investors, including the Sharesies investors. But we're very clear that we could not stay where we were. We had to redevelop the existing 2-blade turbines as they age, and they don't have a management contract where you can go and get new parts, because it's original technology, which finishes and ceases, wears out in the 2030s or thereabouts. So we had to make a decision to refurbish those or to go for a larger development. And we went for a larger development, and hence we paused dividends and then announced this major transaction with Meridian as a partner, which gave everyone confidence that the pathway could be achieved with a very good partner and availability of capital and project expertise.
So let's just clarify there. So you've got a joint venture with Meridian to repower, extend Te Rere Hau. Now, Te Rere Hau is your biggest asset, pretty much, and obviously what Meridian will get all the energy from, once it's redone. Now that's a pretty big undertaking, and you needed obviously their help to do that. I think it's over 600 million. Would this upgrade be possible without Meridian?
In our view, no, because we're at that stage a $40 million valued company on the New Zealand Exchange, with a $50 million project in front of us. So we needed partners at several levels. We needed partners who would agree to buy the power at the end of the project, which is called a power purchase agreement, a PPA, and we needed someone to co-invest with us in the project. So there needed to be someone who could guarantee the power offtake at the end and who had the skills to help develop the project. As that decision was made, we went to an RFP, a request for proposals to the marketplace, and Meridian came back with a 10 plus 5 offtake agreement for the power at the end of the project.
What does that mean, 10 plus 5?
So
offtake?
10 years plus 5 more years. So 15 years of guaranteed offtake of the power from the...
And that's all of the power
all
from
100%
the
of the power.
site.
Yeah,
Right,
and that's really important, because if you get a creditworthy purchaser of the power generated by the site when the project starts for 10 to 15 years, it means it's very bankable as a project. So banks are saying, well, I've got security of revenue coming through. I'm happy to make a loan to the company, or the JV in this case, to be able to facilitate the development of the project. And so those projects can be quite highly geared. Right? So you can have a lot of debt in those projects because of the security of that revenue stream. So that was very, very important. In addition, the partner had to demonstrate that they could develop the wind farm with us, and as it turns out, Meridian had been completing Harapaki further up the spine of the North Island with another wind farm development, so they had credentials in development and they knew the logistics of trying to get a new farm or extension up and running. And at the same time, they said, well, we'll do all that, but we'd like to buy 19.99% of the shares in your company. So we issued new shares with the consent of shareholders to allow them to come in and become a real partner across several layers. And so they're able to provide us with that expertise for that part of the project, for their 50%. Then we had our 50%, which was still a big amount of money for us to raise. So we were in the project process of also inviting equity participants to come in from around the world, and we got amazing responses for those. And so we're going down the track of looking at crafting the final terms of what the equity providers could give to us when Meridian popped up and said, well, actually, we like the whole thing, so can we buy all of your shares, please, for 25 cents? And we announced that to the market after we'd done our own internal thinking about what was a fair price for the company and what was in the best interest of our shareholders, because we have choices to stay and develop with all the risks associated with that, or we can take a price today which recognises all the work that the board and the management team had done to get to this point, which was around all the risks that have to be managed, and then the logistics to get to a final investment decision. And when you weighed those two things up, the board decided that it was in the best interests of shareholders to take the money today, 25 cents. So that's why the share price jumped so quickly from 12.1 to roughly 23 cents today. So we have to go through a few things, though, to get to that shareholder vote, which is required. We need to get an independent appraisal, so a valuation report, which would tell us, the company, the board and shareholders, that this is in the best interest of the company, because the share price offered reflects the value that the valuer thinks the company's worth. And they'll give us a range, I assume, like they do with other reports. Secondly, we've got to go through a process that's signed off by the court. So you have certain documentation you have to get out, and we hope to get that out in the next few weeks. And then there'll be a shareholder vote, hopefully in June quarter. We're going as fast as we can, but that's the current timetable. So yes, it's a process of thinking about your shareholders and what's in their best interests.
And you think this is better for them? I mean, you will be no longer you will be the last independent.
Well, it's not quite true. I mean, there's several ways to think about this. The project keeps going. It's just done by Meridian. So, in terms of the generation needs of the country, it continues. It's just not done by New Zealand Windfarms. But in terms of other independents, there's obviously the Manawa are independent, but are subject to
Contact Energies trying to buy them.
That's a Commerce Commission issue, clearly. But there's also Pioneer Energy in the South Island. I mean, so there are independents around.
There are still?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. They're not listed. It's probably what you're trying to say, is that we don't have many listed independent renewable energy companies, but there are privately owned renewable companies in for example, the solar space. And if you look at the Transpower website, there's a long list of possible projects yet to come to fruition. So I wouldn't rule out the possibility of others coming to the market if they think that's the best thing for a liquidity event. But you're right, at the moment, we are the last independent listed wind generator. So there's choices. Depending on your motivation to come to New Zealand Windfarms, was it the renewable play?
Yep.
Well, okay, you can continue with that. It's not going to be a small company play. It'll be a Meridian play, which is, it's a very large listed entity on the stock exchange.
Quite a different, a gentailer compared to going.
And it's a gentailer, so it's combined. You're right.
Yeah, so
yes, it's not a pure production play.
No.
It has retail as well. No, you're right.
There are a few hoops to jump through, as you've just explained. What if it fails? What's the plan B?
So we've contemplated that. So that would require us to go back to where we are today, ahead of all this process. And that would mean, our view is that if the 25 cents is not an offer, the share price won't be at 23 cents. So that's one thing. Because the share price is at 23 cents or so today because of the prospect of 25 cents in June quarter. So that will change. I think secondly, we would have to go back to contemplating how we would raise debt and equity again for our share of the project. And we've in discussions with Meridian agreed that if that was to happen, Meridian would fund our half of our 50%. So Meridian's got 50% of the project, we've got 50%. We need to fund half of our 50%. And so they've agreed for $9.8 million to come in and fund that. Now, that's not our view of the value of that slice of our business, but it's a backup so that we can fund what we need to do. But it does mean down the track we'll need to go to the share market again to raise more capital.
Yeah, because that 9.8 million, that's
covers us for our,
nowhere near what it's going to cost, is it though?
Well, it gets us through the initial stages, but we still need bank project debt. Yeah. All those other things need to happen. So it's a more difficult outcome in the sense that it doesn't value in our view, that 50% as much as the 25 cents does, but it means we can continue and live another day and go out to the marketplace as we develop the other parts of our portfolio, Haunui and the South Wairarapa, or other development projects that are on the foot at the moment.
So Haunui, that was what you bought from Genesis back in October 2024. How does that compare to this?
Well, it's another development opportunity in our view. So it has only 12% of the output of our current wind farm at Te Rere Hau. So not the redeveloped one, but the existing one. So it's small, but it has development possibilities to upgrade the existing Enercon turbines and put more turbines on the same site. So we saw that as a great opportunity to improve the economics of that site, and it was an asset that Genesis clearly didn't want, and so we're very happy to take it over, which was a great acquisition for us Q4 last year.
But doesn't Genesis get the power from that site? So what will happen if Meridian does?
Well, they have a contract with us, so the contract stays in place.
Right. So even though Meridian would potentially buy New Zealand Windfarms, then they would be supplying Genesis with power from that wind farm. Craig, just to finish off, what would be your message for New Zealand Windfarm investors?
Yep. So at this point in our history of the company, we have a 25 cent offer from Meridian in front of us to purchase all the shares from our shareholders at 25 cents as we go through this scheme of arrangement process. In the documentation, there'll be pros and cons given to investors around why you should or why you should not. But the question in our minds was the relative risks of both. Cash in the hand at 25 cents, which we'll see what the independent valuer says, but in our view is a fair price given all the work we've done to date to get the developments up to this point in time. You could say there are other opportunities in front of us with the repowering and Haunui and our other sites, but there are also risks with those. Nothing is certain about the future. We haven't got to a final investment decision yet for Te Rere Hau, and that requires us to look at all the logistics of the repowering, the civil engineering, the electrical engineering, the new turbines, taking down the old turbines. There's lots of things to happen, right? And there's always risks with that outlook. So on balance, if the independent valuer agrees with us, then we think 25 cents is a great outcome for our current shareholders and is unanimously supported by the board of directors.
And there's no white knights in the wings, are there?
If there are, the wings haven't flown to me, so I don't know.
So if Craig from New Zealand Windfarms says there are no white knights in the wings, why is Meridian so keen? According to Meridian CEO Neal Barclay, it's a pretty spectacular site. Plus, for him, there's pressure to make this deal happen sooner than later. I sat down with Neal Barclay to give investors the Meridian perspective. Neal, welcome to the studio.
Thanks, Helen.
You are leaving Meridian, I think, at the end of June. When we think about this New Zealand Windfarms scheme, if you like, that investors are going to be looking at, is this something you wanted to get across the line before you leave?
Yeah, it is. Look, when you take on a CEO role like mine, you don't do it to create some sort of legacy. You do it to sort of work with teams and do some good things. But of late, I have started to look back and think about the legacy that I might be leaving behind. And there's some things I'm super proud of. I think the way we've developed our retail proposition in Meridian is outstanding. We've grown our market share. We've almost doubled the size of the retail business in the last 5-6 years. And in my time in the business, we've also built about 6 wind farms in New Zealand, a couple in Australia, and with Te Rere Hau, we would have produced enough new renewable energy to power about 500,000 homes. And I think that's something that I'm very proud to leave behind.
Te Rere Hau is the wind farm near Palmerston North, which is really the crown and the jewel for New Zealand wind farms. If this deal goes through, what does that do for what Meridian has? I think you've got about, is it 8 wind farms?
We've got 6 operating wind farms in New Zealand at the moment. This would be our 7th.
Yeah.
But it's also our largest, so it would increase the portfolio of wind assets by about 35%. That's significant. Meridian's largely a hydro generator. Most of our generation assets are in the South Island.
Yes.
But this would bring our wind portfolio up to about 20% of our total generation, and that's becoming quite meaningful.
Is there plans to extend that even further? I mean, what's the...
Yeah, absolutely. Look, we've got a huge amount of renewable resources in this country, and that's our future, that's our opportunity. So we've been working on building a portfolio of options that we can develop, both wind, solar. We've even got a battery being built in Northland right now. We expect to sign off on about $1 billion of investment this calendar year, which would include Te Rere Hau, and about $3 billion by the end of this decade, and about $10 billion by 2050 as part of our efforts to help decarbonise the New Zealand economy.
Where does solar fit with that? What's the ideal sort of percentage breakdown for those 3 types of energy?
Well, I think hydro will remain the mainstay of the New Zealand electricity system. We're so lucky to have it. It's so flexible. It's the envy.
Although lately, Neal, with the lakes being down, the
lakes can move around a wee bit, but what we know is if we build out more wind, solar, and the geothermal that's been built is very helpful as well.
Yeah.
The risk of hydro shortfall actually reduces because we've got a more diversified generation fleet around the whole country. So that's really our future. Now, solar has a strong part to play. What we've been finding of late, interestingly, but not too surprisingly, is when you have those high, very calm weather systems that don't bring the rain, they also don't bring the wind. Alternatively, solar is a really strong generation option at times like that. So we think solar complements wind, hydro, and the geothermal we have in the system today, and will ultimately get us to 100% renewable electricity.
Because how often would you need to rely on, say, thermal, which is sort of coal and gas? Well, it was gas for a while anyway.
Look, the amount of thermal generation in the New Zealand system has reduced from about 35% of the total system needs 15 years ago to about 12% today. Right. So that's going down all the time, and we will burn less and less thermal fuel as we progress, as we build more wind, solar, and decarbonise. But when we do need it, we really need it.
Yeah,
like last winter and like this coming winter.
Yeah.
And we've got a problem in this country because investment slowed down in the gas and domestic gas. And that's unfortunate because domestic gas is a lot less carbon intensive than burning coal. But what's occurred is the investment hasn't gone in. We've got a shortfall of gas, so we're actually having to burn more coal in times where we have low hydro inflows. We will manage through that. It's probably a 2-3 year sort of pinch point, we're calling it. But as the new renewables, including projects like Te Rere Hau, come on stream, we'll start burning less coal again, and just transition, it's inevitable we transition to close to 100% renewable electricity grid. And that's going to happen probably within the next 15 years.
Next 15 years, right. Yeah, because this last winter was tough, and even your interim results just recently, that really showed that you had some hedging that you had to do because you didn't have that gas coming on stream, and you had to pay for that because you had a loss, I think it was 121 million net loss, compared to, say, a profit of 191 million the year before. Quite a big difference. Are you confident that, say, investors looking at this now from the New Zealand Windfarms perspective, that you can kind of mitigate that and not have quite the same thing happen? Or
yeah, look, Meridian, we're a renewables only energy company. We rely on Mother Nature. So when it doesn't rain, we don't have the fuel to generate to meet our customer commitments, so we have to buy generation from someone else. And so we plan for the type of event that happened last year. We carry, our balance sheet is very, very, if you call it unlevered, it's very flexible. There's a lot of capacity in the balance sheet to be able to cope with a poor financial year on the back of a really extreme weather situation that did occur. It was the driest period between May and August 2024 that we've ever seen. We've actually just gone into another dry. It's been the driest period between December and March that we've ever seen. But we're still in reasonably good shape for the winter, and it's starting to rain now, which is helpful. But we've had a couple of really extreme weather systems. That's what we set our business up to cope with. And it doesn't put too much pressure on the business at all. We expect to get back to something more like normal going forward, and it wouldn't slow down our commitment to building new renewable projects, and certainly wouldn't slow down our commitment to building Te Rere Hau.
looking at Te Rere Hau then, it was a development project, or it has been, or it still is at the minute, a 50-50 joint venture between you and New Zealand Windfarms. You now want to buy the entire company. You have a 20% stake already. When was it that you thought, what's the point of us keeping going like this? Why don't we just take the whole thing on?
A few months back, as we were moving through the project and as the JV partnership went to the market to assess what the level of debt the JV would have to incur would be and the cost of that debt, it became pretty apparent that given Meridian's flexible balance sheet that we just referred to, we could borrow the money a lot more cheaply than the JV could. And that was the value equation that meant that us taking a much larger stake in New Zealand Windfarms would make sense for New Zealand Windfarms shareholders and ultimately for Meridian shareholders as well. It's a more efficient way to finance the project to make sure it gets delivered as quickly as we can. And
you obviously did a bit more due diligence before you made that call, and you were pretty happy obviously with what you saw.
Yeah, absolutely. We think it's the best wind site in the country.
Why is that?
It's just the wind conditions are perfect. It'll have about a 50%, more than 50% wind capacity factor. So that means if you build it to produce a certain amount of energy, you'll get at least 50% out of that. Now, compare that to, say, what they get in Australia, late 20s. Most other wind farms in New Zealand, 35 to 40, 45 maybe. This is 50% plus. So it's an exceptional wind site. Very windy place, as anyone from Palmy North would attest to.
Yeah, not that I do, but I've been past it and it's always going, that's for sure, yeah.
So it's a great site. Because of the existing wind farm there, we can leverage some of the roading and so forth that's already in existence, so there are some cost savings available. We're not at the point of commitment though, so there's still work to be done. There's still risks involved, and you never know for sure exactly what wind you're going to get out of it until you've stood up the 39 turbines that will hopefully go into play in this particular wind farm. Yeah,
so we're talking 39 in a couple of stages, I think that is, isn't it?
No, that'll be built
all at once.
It's two separate parts of the property, but it'll be developed as one project.
One project, okay. And I mean, the cost is still significant, though. I've seen figures of 500 to 600 million.
It'll be north of $600 million.
Yeah.
So it's a huge project, a big undertaking. Yes. But it's, this is what we do in Meridian. We've built 6 of these so far, plus a couple in Australia. We know how to do it. We've got the experienced team, and they will get it done. But there's still some challenges in front of us. And to give you an example, just 2 days ago, Within the wind farm, the existing wind farm itself, there's an airways facility that communicates with planes flying over and around the region. Really important piece of kit. We had agreed with the airways to reposition that facility to a different, high point in the region, away from the wind farm. Turns out that new spot won't work. They can't get the radio signals that they need. So we need to find another place. Now, there are other options, but it means that we're likely to delay the project by another month or two as we work that through. These are the sorts of things that you work through as a wind farmer. It's often 2 steps forward, 1 step back, maybe a couple sideways, but I think what we have shown at Meridian, we have the capability and the experience to get it done, and we will get it done.
Are we first class in the world then for wind farming?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the onshore wind resource in New Zealand is the best in the world. When I first joined Meridian, I went off to see one of our main suppliers, Siemens in Denmark, and they had the wind farm out here in Wellington at Makara, we call it West Wind, plastered all over their buildings because it was the best performing wind farm that they had built anywhere in the world. And Te Rere Hau will be an even stronger performing asset than that one.
Because with climate change, we're supposed to get windier. So is it even more potential?
Yeah, in New Zealand there is, absolutely. It's interesting, with climate change, we're likely to get more rain into where the hydro catchments are in this country and more wind into those areas that we're building wind farms. So it should improve the overall generation capability out of the assets that are being deployed, have been deployed and will be deployed.
You said before there's a few hurdles to go. You've got a few things you need to sort out. There's a shareholder vote. There's a High Court, Commerce Commission. I think there's a number of regulatory things as well. How confident are you that this will go through?
Well, we think the offer that we've put on the table is outstanding value for New Zealand wind farm shareholders. You're getting a good return on the asset and taking no risk from this point on, and there is still quite a lot of risk and work to be done. So we think it's a really good option. We think it's a fair deal, and it's fair for the Meridian shareholders as well. So we think it's a great example of working together with a board that have actually put the asset on us. We've had to front with our very best foot, put our very best foot forward. But we think it'll work through the process, and subject to shareholder approval, it'll be a great outcome for all concerned.
We've got quite a big contingent of shareholders on Sharesies, I think 20,000, 12%, which is quite something for a retail block. Do you ever hear from them, or do you sort of know much about what they might be thinking since this was announced? I think
No, I haven't heard directly, other than through the New Zealand Windfarms board members. They're communicating directly with their shareholders. It's not for us, other than this sort of pitch. But from Meridian's perspective, we're learning more and getting more engaged with Sharesies shareholders for sure. And I think our CFO Mike Roan, who's the next CEO, by the way, he's been on a couple of sort of similar podcasts as this. So. Yeah, it's certainly an area of growth. It's a great opportunity for Kiwis to take ownership of some outstanding assets in our country. I use it myself for my share portfolio. Yeah. So we're happy and more than willing to engage with Sharesies shareholders as much as of use to them.
I won't ask you for tips then on share trading this time.
No, and I wouldn't at the moment either, because the share market is it's blood on the floor all over the place. But it's due to international matters that are outside of we folk in New Zealand. So we've just got to ride through that for the time being.
When you think about those New Zealand wind farm shareholders, I mean, they are potentially going to be shareholders in Meridian. It's quite a different company to what they signed up for. It's a gentailer. It's got, as you said before, a number of challenges and opportunities. What would you say to them?
Our growth prospects are fantastic. Renewable energy's the future. It's the competitive advantage for New Zealand. So it's certainly a place that I have a lot of personal holdings in the company, and I'll keep that even when I've moved on from being chief executive.
Thanks to Neal Barclay of Meridian and Craig Stobo of New Zealand Windfarms for their insights around the potential takeover. Also look out for a bonus episode with Neal Barclay as we find out what it's like to be a CEO of a gentailer. You can watch Shared Lunch on YouTube or follow us on your favourite podcast app. Leave us a rating and tell us what you'd like to hear next.